Now we're going to be moving into the first major topic of the semester. I mean, this is all important stuff that we've been talking about, but here's the real meat and potatoes is starting right now. We're going to go through the history of astronomy from ancient times up till today, okay? And does anybody know how old astronomy is? Does anybody know how old astronomy is? Oh, and by the way, all of this history stuff I'm going to be talking about is all from chapter 3 in the book, if you need to look over it. You don't need to read anything yet, but it's chapter 3 if you want to follow along. How old is astronomy? Does anybody know? Anybody know how old astronomy is? How long have people been doing astronomy? 20 years? 25 years? 2,000 years? How long's it been? Give me a guess. When was astronomy invented? Who knows? Y'all scared on this one. It's a long time. It's a long time. It's a long, long, long time. So I like a lot of you guys are saying 5,000 because that's the time I said last time that writing was invented was around 5,000 years ago. It turns out astronomy is way older than writing, okay? It turns out that we don't even know how old astronomy is. That's how old astronomy is. As far as we can tell, astronomy is possibly as old as humanity, okay? We have evidence that cavemen and women were doing astronomy pre-writing, right? Sometimes it's actually called the oldest science. Somebody mentioned that in the chat. Debatable. It's kind of hard to tell what people are doing, but it's definitely one of the very oldest. What evidence do we have that ancient cave people were doing astronomy? How can we know? How do we know that ancient cave people were doing astronomy? What's the evidence? Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The literal writing on the walls. It's cave paintings. Cave paintings are some of the first art that ever existed. And if you're doing some of the very first art that ever existed, you're probably going to draw stuff that's important to you. And what do we typically see in these cave paintings? Like animals, maybe like some kind of bison type thing or other. Here's some animals I like to eat. Here's some tigers and stuff. Watch out for bears. I don't check those out. Maybe there's like a picture of your family, like a crude stick figure drawing of your family, because they're like, oh, me caveman like these things good, right? But in a lot of those cave drawings, there's also constellations, okay? Constellations and things we think might be comets and things. So that means that we know that they were studying the sky, and they were making connections out there. And that's crazy if you think about it, because here's a good question. See if you guys can figure it out. If you're a cave person, what is your job? What is your only job as a cave person? What do you do? What do you do all day? Yes. Pretty much, you're getting it. Your job is just to survive. And was that an easy job back then? No. There was a very good chance that every day you woke up, you would know that by the end of that day, it was probable that you would be dead. You'd be a dead person by the end of the day. I imagine people would get up every day, look at everybody around them, and be like, hey, I love you guys. If we don't make it today, I don't know what cave people did for funerals, but they were probably thinking about it, right? So, yeah, every day it was just, bears! Oh no, these berries I ate, they're poison. Oh no, and then you're dead, right? Just everything around you was just killing you all the time, and it was an extremely hard job to just stay alive, okay? And this is before cities, everybody's nomads, you were just wandering around hoping to be not dead. So here's the thing, when are you going to do most of your stargazing? at night. And what's out at night? Lots of hunters. Lots of hunters were out at night. And what is going to be likely to happen if the time when there's a lot of predator animals out, if you decide you're just going to do this, you're just going to be here doing this, what might happen to you at this point? What's going to happen? Yeah, you die. You die, right? You're going to be dead. You'll get killed doing that. And what that means is it's crazy that people were doing astronomy, because doing astronomy was dangerous back then because everything was dangerous. Everything wanted you dead, right? Somebody's asking a question right there. I will get to that in just 1 second. So the fact that they were doing it tells us that it must have been important to them. And so if somebody in your group was going to do astronomy, that means that the other people in the group are going to have to take time out of their busy schedule of keeping themselves alive to keep this other person alive who seems like they're barely trying. If they didn't care about the astronomy, they would totally let that astronomer just die. They would just let that person get eaten by the bears, right? But they didn't, so that means it was important. And it was important for a few things. And I'm going to ask, what was it important for? One of the things somebody's actually already mentioned, navigation, right? They used the stars to find their way around. And why was that important? That was important because they were nomads, right? They were nomads. And what did nomads do? If you're a nomad and all of the food runs out where you're living, what do you got to do? What do you got to do at that point? If I'm over here and I'm like, oh no, all the berries. I ate all the berries. The berries are gone. These berries were supposed to last us all year. Yeah, we're going to have to move. And the problem is that there's not necessarily a lot of, there's no roads. There's no buildings. You can use some landmarks to get around, but what if you hit a desert or you need to cross a giant lake or a sea or something? If I need to get over here to get the good berries, one thing I can use is I can use the stars to tell direction, right? One thing we didn't talk about, remember we said the stars always come back to the same spot on the same day? There's some stars that are always north and some stars that are always south. And that means if you are good at finding constellations, if you got a good map of the stars and you know which constellations are always in the north, you can use, somebody's mentioning the North Star. That's one that they would have used, right? They would have used a North Star, a star that's always over the North Pole to tell the direction of north, right? And so you can use that to as a compass, essentially, okay? So navigation. But I would argue that there's another thing they were using it for that's even more important than navigation, okay? Let's think about this. What else can you use the stars for as an ancient cave person that would be useful to you? And as a hint, remember we said that the stars follow a pattern every year, okay? Oh, and somebody said light. Being able to predict the moon cycle would help you with light at nighttime. That would actually be very helpful too. But yeah, somebody's mentioning this. You can tell time with the constellations. You can tell what season it is based on the constellations. Specifically, you can use the actual zodiac as a calendar, as you guys were saying before. Certain constellations are out at certain parts of the year. So that means that right before winter happens, right? Certain constellations are going to come out. And if you're good at reading the stars, you can tell, oh, hey, look, it's that constellation that comes out before everything gets snowy, guys. I know that it's going to get snowy because those stars came out, right? And if you can do that, then you can start preparing for winter if you know that winter's coming because you saw the constellations that come up right before winter. You could start gathering berries. Oh, hey, there's the constellation that comes out when the bears start showing up. Watch out, guys. Let's start building spears, right? And so this kind of stuff would keep your tribe alive, right? And by the way, at this point, there was no difference between astronomy and astrology. They were the same thing. It was just all reading the stars at this point. There wasn't a lot of... This stuff hadn't been invented yet, right? This process, nobody had figured that out yet. So these were the same thing. And this is actually where astrology originally came from. Check it out. There's a guy in your tribe, and he can tell you that winter is coming because he saw some stars in the sky. What does it seem like that person is doing? What does it seem like they're doing if they can see some stars and tell you winter's coming? What does it seem like that person is doing? They might think it's like some kind of religious experience. That's good. They might think that these people, they're talking to the sky. Maybe they're talking to the gods. But here's the thing. It looks like they're predicting the future. They may even think they're predicting the future. They think that they have some knowledge of the future. And additionally, and here's the important part, if this set of stars always comes up before winter happens, every single time, essentially what's happened here is that they started to think that the stars coming out made winter happen. Okay? They're able to tell the future because these stars made winter happen. Okay? So, did the stars make the winter? Did the stars make the snow? No. Essentially what happened is that the stars came out and winter happened, but it's not a cause and effect relationship, right? So, I'll get to that in a little bit. So, check this out. Here we go. Lost my train of thought. Sorry. So that's essentially where the idea of horoscopes came from. If the stars could make the winter happen, then who's to say the stars can't make stuff happen to me or the animals? The stars were making the bears go away sometimes. The stars were making the good buffaloes show up sometimes. The stars were making the flowers come out sometimes. But again, it's not really cause and effect. It just looked like cause and effect. And so they applied that to their own life, and that's where the whole idea of horoscopes came from. People misunderstanding what was happening with the seasons. But it's super important to be able to tell when the seasons are going to happen, again, because you're going to be able to stay alive if you can prepare for them. And in fact, that being able to use the stars to tell when the seasons were going to happen is why we were able to invent cities, okay? This is why we were able to invent the city. Because here's the thing. If you're a nomad, you can't live in a city, okay? You can't have a permanent place that you're going to live all year long. Because eventually, if you don't do anything, the food's going to run out in that city, right? So if you want to have food all year long in a city, what are you going to have to learn how to do? What are you going to have to start doing for the first time? What do people in cities need that nomads don't? It's a way to get food. Yes. Yes. Good job. Gonna give a couple more people a chance to type that in there. Farming, planting food, farming, agriculture, right? In order to have cities, we had to invent agriculture. But in order to invent agriculture, we had to be good at telling when the seasons were going to happen. If you plant at the wrong time, you're not going to get a good harvest. And if you don't get a good harvest, your city dies. And back then, it could take one bad harvest to completely wipe an entire city out permanently. So without astronomy, we wouldn't have been good enough at telling when the seasons happened, in order to invent cities. So the whole reason we're able to have cities now is because of astronomy. So that's something, a good reason to have studied astronomy right there, right? For those ancient people. Now, here's the thing. Okay, so people were doing this all over the world. All over the world, people were getting better and better at astronomy. But that meant that society could get stabler and stabler and stabler. As we got better at astronomy, we got better at farming. And as we got better at farming, less and less people died. And basically, eventually we got to the point where it wasn't as hard to stay alive in one given day. Not everybody had to be a hunter. Not everybody had to be able to fight bears. Because we can settle down, we can make things like walls to keep the bears out and keep the animals from eating our grain, right? And so we were able to branch out and start having other jobs because of astronomy, right? And again, this was happening all over the world. One good example is, here we go. Anybody know what this is? Anybody know what this is? It's a place you could go, even today. What's this? This is Stonehenge. Yeah, this is Stonehenge. Does anybody know what Stonehenge is? Does anybody know what this is? What's this place? What's it for? Let's put it that way. What is Stonehenge? How was it built? Probably aliens. I'm just kidding. It's not aliens. It's not aliens. I'm sure ancient people could figure out some kind of way. There are, if you read into the history of this, it was difficult to make. But yes, this is it's actually an astronomy observatory used for telling time and seasons. This is an ancient observatory. These stones here aren't set up in random places. I mean, some of them might be for aesthetic reasons, but a few of them are set up so that if you stood in the middle, like if I was standing in the very middle of this, and I look in a certain direction, some of the stones are set up to mark the location that the sun rises on certain days of the year. So because of the tilt of the earth, the sun rises in slightly different places every day of the year. We'll talk more about that later. But you can mark the beginning of each season with the place that the sun rises on certain days. And what you can do is, if you're an astronomer, you can set this up with the stones in those right locations, and then anybody else can come along and stand in the middle of Stonehenge and know if it's the first day of summer or whatever season you're looking at by seeing, oh, is the sun rising at the summer stone? Nope. Okay, it's not summer yet. Don't do the summer stuff yet, guys. Don't do the summer part of the farming process. It's not yet. It's not yet. It's oh, right there. When the sun rises behind that stone, you know it's summer and you could start doing your summer plans. And that's important because is it easy as an individual to tell what day of the year it is just by looking at the stars? Like if you went out today, if somebody had knocked you out and you had been like in a coma for a long time and you went out today and looked at the stars, how many of you guys would be able to tell what day of the year it was based on where the sun was rising or where the stars were? I can tell you I can't. I'm not that good at it. And it would be the same thing with these ancient people. So they set up things like this in order to make it so that other people could tell what season it was. Okay? And there were things like this all over the world. Your book has some pictures from South America, Central America, Europe, North America. There's places in China. There's places all over the world like this. And in fact, some ancient settlements, the only building that still exists is the observatory. Okay? And the reason for that is that it was one of them. If the observatory broke, they wouldn't be able to do their farming as well, and therefore everybody would die. So that frequently they used their best materials to make those buildings. Okay, so here's the thing. Do you have to know? I'm almost done for the day. Do you have to know why the stars move across the sky the way they do in order to be able to use them in this way? In order to be able to use them to predict the seasons and for navigation? Do you have to know why the stars do what they do in order to use them to predict seasons and use them for navigation? No. No, you don't. You don't know. You don't have to know why something works in order to use it, right? Like right here, here's my cell phone, right? Here's my cell phone. Do I have to know how a cell phone works inside in order to use my cell phone? No, I don't. I don't know how the computer parts in here work. I mean, like, I know some basics, but I don't really, like, I couldn't, like, make one from scratch. Somebody else figured this out for me, and I can use it. I don't need to know how it works. So for a long time, people didn't really worry too much about how the stars did this stuff, how the sun did this stuff, because it wasn't super important to keeping them alive. But over time, as we got better at astronomy, we got better and better at telling exactly when the seasons start, and so society was able to become more and more and more stable, right? And as society became more stable, there became more time. People got more rich. And essentially, as society got more stable, people could dedicate some time to figuring out why this happens, okay? So let's talk about this. The first group of people that we have evidence that they actually tried to figure out why all of this stuff happened was the ancient Greeks. They're probably not the only ones who tried to figure out why this stuff happened, but they're the only ones that we know of that were actually trying to use the scientific method to do it. So that whole method we talked about at the beginning, the ancient Greeks, as far as we know, invented the scientific method. They invented the idea of coming up with hypotheses and testing them to see if they were right. Not just coming up with ideas and saying they were right, coming up with ideas, testing them, and strengthening them over time. Again, they're probably not the only people who invented that method, but this was thousands of years ago, and so a lot of records from around the world have been destroyed. So there's not a lot of stuff back then that we actually know about, but we do know that the ancient Greeks were doing it. So what we're going to be talking about next is what the ancient Greeks thought about how all this stuff worked. Now, last thing I want to say before we go out today, the ancient Greeks, were they right? Because they were science, they were doing science, were they right about everything? Were they able to figure out the correct explanation for why the stars did what they do? Were the ancient Greeks right about the whole shebang? No. No, they weren't. Now, that said, don't get the wrong idea. A lot of people think that the ancient Greeks were just wrong about everything, and we'll talk about that next time. But we'll see when we talk about it next time that they were actually right about some things, okay? They were right about some things about how things work out there in space. They were really wrong about a lot of other things. However, even with the stuff that they were wrong on, they actually did good scientific work to come up to the wrong conclusion. We'll explain why that is. We kind of got into that a little earlier today.